And Mark wrote a really good piece in the UT today about the big questions surrounding San Diego State heading into the year with the departures of players like Matt Bradley.
5 big departures,
Rowe.
5 big questions.
Exactly. So we have Mark back with us here on Jon and Jim. Mark, enjoyed your piece today in the UT as we're approaching the start of an Aztec season in early November. So I guess I'll start it by asking this: when you look at the players they're replacing, Nathan Mensa, Matt Bradley, Keyshawn Johnson, Adam Seiko, Ogwuka Rope, from your perspective, which of those players is the most challenging for San Diego State to replace?
Well, it's interesting. When I started writing this, I thought, well, it's going to be Nathan Mensa because just for the defensive piece and how good he was, and they don't really have another Nathan Mensa necessarily waiting in the wings. But as I looked into it, they all kind of bring their own little piece to the equation, and I think in their own ways, it's going to be challenging. I think as a whole, just that experience culture factor is going to be the biggest thing. But if you want to drill down and look at technical, and you had to pick one, I guess it still would be Nathan, just because of his ability to switch the 1-5 ball screen, rim protection. They didn't post double nearly as much as they have in previous seasons, just because they knew that Nathan could cover anybody in the nation. It didn't matter who it was. He was as good or better than them defensively. And that's just such a nice thing to have, and gave him so many options on defense. And so it doesn't mean they won't play good defense this year. It just means they've got their work cut out for them, and they'll probably have to do things a little bit differently. And it's probably the biggest unknown of all of them.
Mark, a couple guys on this team that didn't play much last year, but they're spoken very highly of, Elijah Saunders and Miles Byrd. What do you expect their roles to be this season? And do you expect that this team wants them to have pretty big ones?
Well, when you look at the roster, you've got 6 veterans that have experience in college basketball, have played either for San Diego State or other teams quite a bit of basketball. And that's the 4 returning rotation pieces: Lamont Butler, Darian Trammell, Micah Parrish, and Jaden Ledee. And then you add a Reese Waters from USC and Jay Powell from Campbell, and that's a pretty good 6. What Miles Byrd and Elijah Saunders bring are the 7th and 8th guys. And as we know in the past, those guys get, almost starters minutes. That's a huge uptick in expectation, uptick in meaningful minutes, uptick in responsibility for guys who really haven't done anything. And so those, when you talk about unknowns, those are huge unknowns. But they're relying on, because if you go to the next tier of guys, they're guys who've never played college basketball. And so, I think we'll see where they fit in, but they both are versatile players and can play multiple positions, and got a little bit of a taste of it last year. And like you said, they have huge expectations for these guys, and we're going to find out.
Mark Ziegler from the UT is with us on Jon and Jim. Mark, we talk a lot about scheduling when it comes to San Diego State basketball, and they have certainly put together a challenging schedule. Provo in the first week at BYU, St. Mary's, potentially Xavier in Vegas, at Grand Canyon, Gonzaga, right? I mean, this certainly isn't a walk in the park. I mean, what do you make of the way they've put together the schedule in anticipation for conference play?
Well, there's sort of 2 pieces here, and we'll see how they fit together. The one piece is they want to play as many good teams as they can. They think they're going to be good. They want to challenge themselves. They want to build a NCAA tournament resume, and this schedule gives them the opportunity for all those things. But the second piece is that doesn't give them a lot of time to sort of back into the season and figure out rotations and minutes and lineups. One of the biggest questions they're going to have is, do they start a small lineup? Do they start Micah Parrish or Reese Waters at the 4? And just go with one quote unquote big and Jaden Ledee, who likes to play on the perimeter as well. And that creates some matchup problems defensively if they play a bigger team. And they're going to play some big teams right out of the gate because they're playing good, solid, whether it's a St. Mary's, it always has bigs. BYU has bigs. Xavier and Washington are also big teams. Obviously, Gonzaga is known for their bigs. So that doesn't give you the chance to sort of play a bunch of cupcakes, experiment, see how it works, see what doesn't work, try some bigger lineups. They don't get to do that. And they're basically going to, right out of the gate, are going to have to come with what they think is their best lineup and go with it and just kind of piece it together as they go along. So it's going to be interesting to see how the unknowns of the roster mesh with the challenges of the schedule.
And you mentioned one of the transfers there, Reese Dixon-Waters, and Jay Powell is another one. You know, the expectations for those two players coming into this season, I would assume Reese Dixon's filling that Matt Bradley role, Jay Powell off the bench. How do you think they're going to fit in with this team this upcoming season?
Well, Reese Waters is a better known player because he played at USC and he was the Pac-12 Sixth Man of the Year. And so obviously the expectations for him are going to be sort of a plug and play for Matt Bradley. He's a different player.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to be the guy. I mean, Matt Bradley is such a unique skill set in the ability to create his own shot off the dribble, one-on-one, if he gets double teamed to pass. And he filled that role for San Diego State last year. I don't think Reese Waters is just going to give him the ball and everyone's going to clear out and they say, go find us a basket. He's not that kind of player. He can score at all three levels, but he's much more a score out of the flow of the offense type guy. He's probably a better help side defender than Matt Bradley. Matt Bradley was very good on the ball, wasn't very good in ball screens, and was sort of average off the ball, and he probably would admit that. Reese Waters is a better overall, all-around defender. And so in many situations, they'll get an uptick from him, and he might have different assignments than Matt Bradley would have last year. Jay Powell is just a unique, interesting guy. He's 6'9", 6'10". He's skinny, but he can handle the ball. He's really agile. He can shoot the three. He can stretch the floor. And we'll see if he can guard a four-man at this level. Obviously, he did not play at this level. And so sometimes there's a little bit of transition moving up a level for guys. Sometimes there isn't. But that'll be interesting to watch. He really came out in the end of last season. If you saw him play at the beginning of the season, you would say, he's okay. At the end of last season, he was the best player in the Big South, I think. Most people would agree with that, and his numbers back that up. And so he's a kind of a guy, he could start, he could be a super sub off the bench, but he just gives them a lot of versatility, particularly on the offensive end.
Mark Ziegler from the UT with us right now. Jon and Jim, San Diego Sports 760, free on the iHeartRadio app always as well. So, Mark, you've been writing about the fact that San Diego State has been hosting some really highly rated recruits. It feels like a little bit of like as college basketball yings, the Aztecs go in the opposite direction. This was a little bit of transfer U, where they've had so much success in the transfer portal era and before it as well. And now they're hosting, you wrote about, I think it's Braden Burries, who's one of the highest rated recruits to ever be hosted by San Diego State for a visit. What is San Diego State's strategy here when it comes to prep players as opposed to transfers moving forward?
Yeah, I think you picked up on something there that I'm starting to think is going to be a little bit of a trend. If you ask Brian Dutcher, he's going to say, look, we recruit both. We need our freshmen and four-year players to set our culture. That's why they're so important to us. We recruit character as much as we recruit talent in freshmen. And then transfers we bring in, we've been successful with them. We'll continue to do that. And I still think they will. I think the NIL market, unless something changes drastically in that, either that means there's there's some sort of national legislation that really reins it in. Don't think that's happening. Or a John Moores decides, you know what, I really want to see, San Diego State basketball succeed. Here's $2 million a year for NIL. I'm not sure that's happening either. They're going to struggle in the NIL market, and that's going to hurt them with transfers. And so I think what they see is sort of an undervalued market with freshmen. Freshmen aren't commanding the big NILs that the transfer players are, because transfers are known quantities versus the unknown quantities. Also, college basketball is getting so much older that it's harder and harder for freshmen to play and be an impact. So I think they see that value there, and they're mining that. I mean, you see a guy in Magoon Guelph, who is there right now, who is going to probably redshirt, a 7-footer with incredible skills, and they're just going to stash him and develop him. They had a recruit in last week, David Majak from Dream City Christian in the Phoenix area, 7-footer, great hands, but only been playing basketball like 3 years, probably another redshirt candidate. But those are the kind of players that they're looking at right now and kind of building for the future. And look, Brian Dutcher has that kind of capital. A lot of coaches don't. They got to win now. Brian Dutcher just went to the national championship game. He can take a patient approach, and I think they probably will.
Interesting. Really interesting stuff. Obviously, Aztec fans are so excited coming off an appearance in the national championship game and Final Four for the first time in school history. We're about 6 weeks out from that opener against Cal State Fullerton on a Monday night in November at Viejas Arena. Mark, we appreciate it. We're looking forward to the upcoming season, and thanks for doing it as always.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, me too. All right, talk to you guys.
Thanks, Mark. Mark Ziegler from the Union Tribune. Now, we are going to, have we even mentioned this on air? Here's a programming note. Do you know what the programming note is?
Let me guess. Saturday? Does that have to do
No,
with
I
Saturday?
think so.
Oh, okay.
Now, Saturday we've been talking about. We're going to be at L. Smith watch party, getting you
Uh-huh.
ready for San Diego State Air Force. Saturday at 5. Our pregame
Oh,
coverage begins at 3.
Vegas.
We're going to be in Vegas again for Mountain West Basketball Media Day, which is Thursday, October 12th. Let me confirm that. It is Thursday, October 12th. We'll talk to Brian Dutcher. We're going to talk to some student athletes, one of which will be Lamont Butler. I think we'll talk to Darion Trammell.
Did he have a good year last year?
Lamont?
Yeah.
We'd have to go back and check.
All right.
He may have had a good year. A little bit like Soto, though. Like, was there a big moment, though? Like, Soto had a nice year, but there hasn't been a moment.
Right. Is there like a moment that you can go back to talk about with Lamont?
Oh, there was the shot he hit in the Final Four, the only game-winning shot in the history of the Final Four with the team trailing to win.
To send them to the national championship?
Four. So there was that. Oh, there was also the Mountain West clincher in the regular season when he hit a 35-footer in Albuquerque against New Mexico at the buzzer. Remember that?
Yeah, these are kind of, I'm not really.
Were those meaningful, impactful
These are
moments?
kind of blanking on me.
Well, we'll be joined in Vegas by Brian Dutcher, Lamont Butler, others. By the way, it's a joint media day with the WCC, the West Coast Conference.
Okay.
And we're expected to be joined by Mark Few on Thursday, October 12th as well. So be listening for some Aztec basketball talk coming up throughout the course of the month of October, of course.
You know, when the national championship happened, it felt like a blur. And the questions after were, all right, how is this going to impact the future for San Diego State? Because it's only going to impact them in the positive, right? It's not going to be a negative.
Man, they got to the national championship game.
Darn it.
It's too bad.
And it was like, okay, we might not know the impact for another 5 years, maybe, right? As far as the recognition goes for this university, for basketball or whatever the case may be, right? It might take a little bit, but there will be an impact. I think there's an impact already happening right now that is with what we just talked about with Mark Ziegler hosting basically a top 10 recruit, the highest recruit they've ever hosted. Ever.
You're right.
I mean, Brian Dutcher is very well respected. He could have, even with just a little bit of a run in the NCAA tournament last year, potentially could have done this. But I think the exposure now, you saw, some high school kids and potentially some transfers. Reese Waters was one of them. There was like, I'm making a call to transfer right now on our way to the national championship game. Who was that? Reese Waters. And so you're seeing the impact, I feel like, pretty quickly with this program.
Yeah, the kid you're referring to, we talked about briefly, this kid, Braden Burries, who's out of the Inland Empire. San Diego State cleans up historically in the Inland Empire. He's the number 11 recruit in the country. The visits he's taken so far are to Houston, Duke, and San Diego State. I mean, that's very impressive. We'll see if they can land a player of his caliber. But even if they don't, a strategy they've had in terms of bringing players in and developing them has worked routinely over and over again, including this past year. All right. By the way, John Fanta, more on college hoops. He's got Lamont Butler as one of his top 20 players or so in the nation for next season. He'll join us coming up at 5:30. Right now, though, let's get to this.